In Los Angeles, Neil enters the hospital and crosses several corridors until he finds the back door. Because he's wearing a uniform, nobody suspects anything. Once outside, he steals one of the ambulances. At a construction supplier, Chris buys a bunch of explosive charges. Downtown, Michael picks up Waingro in a stolen tow truck. Trejo is following an armored car and contacts the others to confirm the location. Chris joins Neil in the ambulance and all 5 thieves put on masks to hide their faces. Neil stops the ambulance in the middle of the road to make the armored car stop too, then the tow truck crashes against it and sends it rolling. The armored car ends up crashing against a bunch of vehicles in a dealership parking lot. While a guard makes a call on the radio for help, the team uses the explosives to blow up the armored back door, which causes the windows and all the surrounding cars to explode too. Then they make the 3 guards come out and Chris proceeds to search the envelopes from the safe until he finds the one he wants. Knowing the police are coming, Trejo puts a spike strip across the street. Waingro gets angry at the guards because they keep moving and he doesn't realize they're deaf and dizzy because of the explosion. Eventually he snaps and shoots a guard in the head. Another guard reaches for his gun but Waingro shoots him down. Then he points his gun at the 3rd guy and after getting his teammates' approval, he kills him too. Once Chris has the right envelope, the team rushes to get in the ambulance. While Trejo drives, everyone changes clothes in the back. Soon the police show up and try to chase them, but the first few cars blow out their tires on the spike strip and crash, leaving the other cars stuck behind them. While the cops search the area on foot, the team abandons the ambulance a few blocks away with a bomb in the back. They drive away in another car while the bomb explodes, destroying their weapons and gear. In the evening, Neil meets with Nate, his money laundering expert. In the stolen envelope, they find hundreds of millions in bearer bonds from a company called Malibu Equity and Investments, owned by corrupt businessman Roger Van Zant. They'll make Roger pay them lots of money in exchange for getting his bonds back. Nate also tells Neil of a $10 million job offered by a man named Kelso and Neil agrees to arrange a meeting with him. Meanwhile, Detective Vincent arrives at the scene of the heist and joins his team to search for clues. They've already found all the vehicles on their system and know the places they were stolen from, but there are no other leads. A homeless man heard the thieves shouting and could identify the nickname Slick being used, but he didn't see any faces. Following all the debris on the scene, Vincent quickly puts together what happened and concludes they're dealing with professionals. At a truck stop diner, Neil joins his team for a meal. Waingro tries to justify his killing the guards, but Neil smashes his head on the table because killing officers causes more in-depth investigations. Then they go outside and Neil continues to beat Waingro up, even getting his gun ready to kill him. However, he has to stop when he sees a police car drive by. The team waits until the vehicle is gone and when they turn around, they discover Waingro has disappeared. They search the whole area to no avail. When Chris arrives home, his wife Charlene notices that the money he brought from the heist isn't as much as he promised. An argument ensues until Chris breaks some things and reveals he used part of the money to pay his bookies. Charlene tries to make him see that he has a gambling problem, but Chris tells her that she can leave if she doesn't like it. When their child starts crying, Chris storms out of the house. The next day, Vincent and his partner burst into a chop shop to interrogate the owner, who regularly works as their informant. They argue for a while until the detectives threaten him with jail time, causing the guy to tell them that his brother will meet with Neil at a club in Koreatown tonight with a possible lead in the case. Meanwhile, Neil meets Kelso, who tells him about a new potential heist. The main downtown branch of the Far East National Bank collects hard currency for distribution to its other branches. On certain days of the week, the bank holds at least 10 million. At first Neil thinks it's a bad idea because the bank employees would quickly set off an alarm. However, Kelso explains he's a hacker and he can shut the alarm down 15 minutes before they strike. While Neil agrees to take the job, Nate talks to Roger to arrange the bond exchange. When Neil gets home, he finds Chris sleeping on his floor. He calls Charlene to let her know where her husband is, then he makes coffee. Chris shares what's happening in his home life and Neil wonders if Charlene may be cheating on him, but Chris denies it. Then Neil tells him about the incoming jobs. Later Neil calls Roger from a payphone to confirm a meeting at a drive-in movie theater. While looking around, he notices Charlene leaving a motel room with another man. Furious, he bursts into the room and confronts Charlene, violently cornering her against the wall. Charlene swears she was just making business, but Neil doesn't believe her and tells her to give Chris one last chance because their next job will fix things. If Chris fails her again after that, then Neil will punish him himself. In Koreatown, Vincent visits the club his informant told him about and meets the brother, who tells him that he was incarcerated with a man who pulls off large heists and was seen on the street recently. Vincent is about to leave because he isn't getting useful information, but the informant reveals that the guy's nickname was Slick. Vincent keeps pressing him until he learns the name Michael and immediately calls his squad, who find Michael's file in the system. They all agree to set up extensive surveillance. At the empty drive-in theater, Neil meets with Roger's drop man and they begin the exchange while they stay in their cars. However, there's a second guy slowly sneaking around that gets close enough to the window to try to shoot Neil. Thankfully, Chris has been hiding nearby all along for situations like this and warns Neil through his headset. Neil sees the assassin in the mirror and drives the car in reverse, which crushes the man's leg. As Neil drives away, Chris opens fire, so the drop man also speeds up and leaves his partner behind. The assassin tries opening fire at Neil's vehicle, but both Neil and Chris start shooting at him at the same time and Neil ends up running over him with the car. The driver almost escapes the theater but he's shot down by Michael. Afterward, Neil checks the payment envelope and finds scrap paper instead of money. He calls Roger to cancel the deal and swears to kill him. That night, Neil and his friends have dinner together with their wives and kids, unaware that the police are watching them. They recognize Chris and Michael from other cases, but not Neil. Meanwhile, Waingro is at a motel with a working lady. After she finishes her services, he reveals he's the infamous serial killer who goes after night workers and quickly kills her. Moments later, the police are investigating the crime scene and Vincent has to stop the victim's mother from coming too close to the body. The lady has a breakdown and Vincent comforts her the best he can. A few nights later, Vincent and his men hide in a van near a precious metals repository, where Michael deactivates the alarm system by climbing the utility pole. While Neil stands guard, Chris breaks the lock and goes inside to find the safe. He then uses special tools to try to break it open. When one of the cops puts down his rifle against the van wall, Neil hears the noise and immediately rushes into the building to announce they're leaving. The trio goes away without stealing anything and Vincent tells his men not to arrest them. A simple breaking and entering would give them just a few months of jail and Vincent would rather catch them on something bigger. The next day, Vincent and his men find Charlene's lover and interrogate him for information. Meanwhile, Neil tells the team that the police must have bugged their phones and thinks they should lie low for a while. However, Chris is in desperate need of money and convinces him to do Kelso's job. The team goes to a shipyard to make some plans and the cops watch them from afar. After the criminals leave, the police try to figure out what the team is planning to do in that area. There's nothing of value to steal there, which makes Vincent realize this is a trap to make the officers reveal themselves. On top of a crane, Neil takes pictures of the entire group. That night, Neil meets with Nate, who gives him intel on all the detectives and how they work. He also shares the schematics for Kelso's bank heist and Neil thinks it's worth the risk. Meanwhile, Vincent gets on the surveillance helicopter that is trailing Neil. After flying for a while, he finally finds him and leaves the chopper to get in a car instead. Vincent chases after Neil, who pulls over to look less suspicious. To Neil's shock, Vincent tells him they should have coffee and asks him to follow him. Minutes later, both men are at a diner discussing how their private lives suffer because of their jobs. Suddenly, Vincent says he doesn't like killing, but he will kill Neil to stop him from killing an innocent. In return, Neil says he won't hesitate to shoot him either. The next day, Vincent arrives at the station and is furious to learn that Neil and his team have managed to disappear without the surveillance team noticing. It turns out the thieves are working at the bank's parking lot, where they're getting things ready for the heist. At the same time, Waingro shows up at Roger's office to offer a deal. Later, Neil takes Chris and Michael to a diner where he recognizes Donald, an old prison friend of his who is working in the kitchen while on parole. At that moment, they get a call from Trejo, who informs them that the police are following him so he won't be able to join them for the heist. Neil decides to approach Donald and offer him Trejo's job, which Donald immediately takes. On his way out, Donald pushes his boss to the ground for treating him like trash. Afterward, Neil, Michael, and Chris enter the bank through different doors. Once they're in the correct positions, Chris begins beating up a guard and ties him up while his friends threaten everyone with weapons to keep them down, disarming the rest of the guards in the process. Neil assures all the hostages that they won't lose a dime because it's insured by the government, so as long as they don't move, nobody gets hurt. Then Neil punches a manager and gets his key, which they use to access the safe and fill their bags with cash. At the police station, the detectives receive information from one of their criminal informants and learn about the bank heist. Vincent and his men immediately take off. At the bank, Michael comes out first and gets in the car with Donald. Next, Chris and Neil come out and they're seen by the police when they arrive. Neil gets in the car first, but Chris stops at the door because he sees the detectives across the street and he opens fire. Civilians panic and begin running away while the cops open fire. Michael also starts shooting through the window and the stray bullets are causing damage all over the place. Soon a bullet hits a cop in the neck, instantly killing him even though he's wearing a bulletproof vest. Vincent rushes to check on his friend and Chris uses the chance to get in the car so Donald can finally take off. All the windows in the vehicle explode because the shootout continues as the officers chase after the criminals on foot. The team doesn't hesitate to shoot back, but Donald is having trouble driving because a bullet destroys 2 of the tires. In all the chaos, Donald ends up getting shot in the head and the car crashes into a parked vehicle. Neil, Michael, and Chris have no choice but to get out and they find the police blocking the road. The shootout goes on and several more cops are killed, not to mention all the cars that are destroyed in the process. The criminals keep on advancing while they fire their weapons, always trying to find cover while looking for a way out. Michael manages to bring down another detective and ends up separated from his friends. Chris reaches the roadblock first, but since he's keeping his eyes on it, he doesn't see the cop sneaking to his left and gets shot in the shoulder. After Neil kills a few more cops, the fight finally ends. Neil rushes to Chris's side and helps him stand up so they can run together to a grocery store's parking lot. A few surviving officers come after them, so Neil keeps shooting at them, killing more cops while the civilians scream in horror. Vincent tries his best to guide the panicking people away from the fire so they won't get hurt. Since the police are busy handling the civilians, Neil manages to get Chris in a car and they drive away. Meanwhile, 2 detectives are going after Michael, who scares a lot of people in a restaurant before crossing a fountain. The chaos causes a kid to be left behind and Michael grabs him from protection. However, Vincent appears behind him and waits for the right moment to open fire, killing Michael with a single bullet to the head. Then Vincent takes the kid back to his mother. When the heist appears on the news, Donald's girlfriend learns of his death and Charlene realizes her husband is in more trouble. In the meantime, Neil has taken Chris to a doctor friend, who removes the bullet and gives him lots of medicine. Chris has a fractured clavicle, but Neil refuses to leave him resting for long. After exchanging his dirty clothes for the doctor's clean ones, Neil tells Chris that Nate will pick him up and keep him hidden until it's time to leave town. First, he needs to find an alternate escape plan because he thinks Trejo has been giving information to the police. Chris announces he's not leaving without Charlene, but Neil explains he'll have to do it because she's a risk. At the same time, Charlene is calling her lover to ask him to take her and her baby away. Moments later, Neil sneaks into Trejo's house with his gun out, only to find his wife dead on the bed. He continues to search the place and discovers his friend bleeding on the floor. It turns out Waingro and Roger forced him to talk to the police by threatening to hurt his wife. When Neil tells him they killed her anyway, Trejo asks for mercy and Neil shoots him before leaving. On his way out, Neil calls Nate to confirm Chris is fine and get Roger's address. Meanwhile, Vincent and his team shoot the door of an apartment and storm inside to grab a guy by his face. Vincent throws him through the balcony before grabbing him by the hair, revealing this is the man who called the station with the heist intel. A furious Vincent yells at him as he demands to know where he got the information and learns it was from Waingro. Back to Neil, he sneaks into the backyard of Roger's house and sees him watching TV. Then he throws a chair at the window to get inside. Pointing his gun at Roger, he asks where Waingro is, but Roger says he doesn't know. Neil responds by shooting him multiple times. Since Charlene's lover made a deal with the police for the information, she and the baby are taken to a safe house. Several cops are guarding her and the detective tries to get her to cooperate to catch Chris. At first, Charlene refuses, so the detective points out that her secrecy makes her an accomplice and going to jail leaves her kid without parents. Charlene then agrees to call Chris to set up a trap. Neil stops at his girlfriend's house and asks her to run away with him. She realizes he's one of the criminals from the heist and runs out of the house, so Neil goes after her and hugs her, promising everything will be fine. In the morning, he gives her some money and sends her to a safe house, but she refuses to kiss him before she leaves. Afterward, Neil visits Nate to get fake passports, credit cards, and plane tickets. When Neil asks about Chris, Nate reveals he left to find his wife. Inspired by this, Neil goes to check on his girlfriend again and gives a speech about loneliness before letting her choose between leaving alone or with him. His words convince her to run away with him. In the evening, Chris arrives at the address Charlene gave him on the phone and the cops make her meet him at the balcony. With just one hand gesture and a look, Charlene manages to tell him that this is a trap, so Chris quickly turns around and pretends he's asking the neighbors for directions before leaving. Charlene goes back inside and tells the cops that the man wasn't Chris, but they don't believe her. A police car blocks the street and asks Chris for an ID, so he gives them a fake one. They fall for it and let him go. A frustrated Vincent goes home and is shocked to find his stepdaughter unconscious in the tub. He immediately takes her out and bandages all her injuries as he realizes she tried to self-delete. Vincent then takes her to the hospital, where he and his wife can only wait for the doctors to save her. On the road, Neil is driving away with his girlfriend when suddenly he gets a call from Nate, who has found out where Waingro is hiding. After some hesitation, Neil turns the car around and drives to a hotel. He tells his girlfriend to wait in the car while he takes care of one last job. Then Neil enters the hotel through the back door and uses the employee's phone. By pretending he's room service, he gets the number of Waingro's room. After stealing a uniform, he crosses the lobby and safely takes the elevator. Once he reaches the floor he wants, he puts a trash can at the door to keep the elevator open and activates the fire alarm. He doesn't know that there are cops in the building expecting him and they see him on the cameras. They page Vincent and he's forced to leave his wife alone in the hospital to join the operation. While the hotel guests panic because they think there's a fire, Neil knocks on Waingro's door while keeping his face away from the peephole. Waingro opens the door just a bit to peek and Neil kicks it on his face. After hitting Waingro a few times, Neil shoots him to death. Then he leaves the room and a cop tries to stop him, but Neil easily beats him down. As the cops surround the hotel, Vincent arrives in a helicopter. He sees the woman alone in the car and gets suspicious, so he begins approaching her. At the same time, Neil comes out and sees Vincent coming, so he runs in the opposite direction while abandoning his beloved. Vincent immediately chases after Neil and they reach the airport, where they start firing at each other. Neil manages to take cover and waits for a plane to fly by so the lights will reveal Vincent's location. However, Vincent sees his shadow and shoots him down first. Before Neil dies, Vincent agrees to shake his hand. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks. Thanks for watching.